Kange's life was a series of constant disappointments. After finishing school, she had been unable to find a job, and each day that passed felt like another blow to her hopes. Her former classmates seemed to have it all: successful careers, rich husbands, children, and a life of comfort, while she had nothing. Her mother's patience had worn thin, constantly reminding her that she had overstayed her welcome in her house. But Kange never gave up. She kept applying for jobs, determined that something would come her way. One rainy night, after another failed interview, Kange walked home feeling utterly defeated. The rain soaked through her clothes, and it felt like the whole world was pressing down on her. She came to a bridge and sat on the railing, her tears mixing with the rain. As she raised her head, trying to wipe her tears, a speeding boda whizzed past her, splashing her with muddy water. She gasped, letting go of the railing in shock. But before she could process what was happening, she fell into the river. She thrashed in the water, terror surging through her as she realized she couldn't swim. "Help! Somebody help!" she screamed, her voice hoarse with panic. The water filled her lungs as she fought to stay above the surface. Just when she thought she was going to drown, a pair of hands pulled her out. It was an old woman. She took Kange to the side and gave her mouth to mouth. Kange coughed violently, her chest aching as she gasped for air. Through the blur of the water and rain, she caught a glimpse of the old woman's face. The old woman then disappeared in an instant. Kange blinked in confusion. There was no one around. She was all alone by the river. Had she imagined it? Confused and weak, Kange limped home, bruised and soaked. When she reached her mother's house, the front door was locked, and through the window, she could see her mother's face twisted in anger. "What time do you call this?" her mother yelled, throwing Kange's suitcase outside into the rain. "You're no daughter of mine. Out there prostituting yourself. That's what you're doing, isn't it? Get out of my house." "No, Mama, it's not like that," Kange cried, kneeling at the door, begging her to understand. "I fell into the river." But her mother's rage was unrelenting. "I don't want to hear it, you disgrace. You have no job, you have no husband, and now you're bringing shame on this house? Leave!" Kange's heart shattered. Her mother slammed the door in her face, leaving her out in the cold, wet night. She dragged her suitcase through the streets, with no destination in mind. Eventually, she collapsed onto the cold, wet pavement, her body exhausted and her spirit broken. She slept there in the rain, with nothing left to hold on to. When she woke up in the morning, she was surrounded by a crowd of people, journalists, with cameras flashing in her face. They called her Lady Shube, asking why someone so wealthy was sleeping on the streets. "I'm not Lady Shube," Kange stammered, confused. "You've got the wrong person." But the journalists kept insisting, their cameras snapping relentlessly. "Lady Shube, why are you here?" they asked, frightened. Kange scrambled to her feet and ran, her mind spinning in disbelief. She ducked herself onto a nearby street and looked herself in the mirror of a parked car. What she saw made her gasp. It wasn't her face staring back at her. It was the face of the old woman who had saved her back at the river. Kange's mind raced. She had only caught a glimpse of the old woman, but she would never forget it. She touched her face, her reflection showing the face of the old woman. She took out her phone and researched about this Lady Shube. Lady Shube was a powerful businesswoman, known across the country for her riches and influence. Her mansion was said to be one of the grandest in the country, and her children, Mugisha and Arinda, were always in the news for their luxurious lifestyles. A strange thought crept into Kange's mind. She was poor, homeless and desperate. Lady Shube was rich, powerful, and now, somehow, Kange had her face. Could this be her second chance? Without thinking twice, Kange flagged down a boda and used the 2,000 shillings she had left to take her to Lady Shube's mansion. When she arrived, the grand gates of the mansion opened and she stepped inside. The mansion was even more magnificent than she had imagined. Golden chandeliers, marble floors, and art hanging from every wall. Kange stepped into the house, her heart racing with anticipation and nerves. She gazed around the spacious living room, her eyes catching the framed photos of Lady Shube and the people she assumed to be her family. There was something strange about the way the house suddenly became quiet when she walked in. Just then, a man slowly peeked out from one of the bedrooms, his face twisted in disbelief. His voice trembled. "Ma'am, is that really you? You are alive?" His voice cracked, and suddenly another woman tiptoed behind him, their faces filled with shock and awe. Kange blinked in confusion. Was Lady Shube supposed to be dead? She thought. But before she could react, the man rushed forward, tears streaming down his face. "Mother, it's me, Mugisha, your son." The woman standing beside him, her eyes swollen with tears, added, "And Amarinda, your daughter. Have you lost your memory? Where have you been, mother? We looked for you all night." Kange's heart raced. "They think I'm their mother," she thought. She gathered herself quickly and with a trembling voice said, I don't remember. I woke up on the streets, surrounded by journalists." She forced tears down her face, her mind racing. She didn't know what else to say, but the disbelief and desperation in their eyes were enough to convince her that she was on the right track. She had to play this role. The housemaid dropped to her knees, thanking the heavens. "Thank God, Lady Shube is alive," she cried, her hands clasping in prayer. Mugisha and Arinda led Kange to a lavish room, telling her that she needed to rest. As soon as she lay on the plush bed, her stomach growled in hunger, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since the day before. "I'm starving," she muttered, her voice weak. "What would you like to eat, mother?" Mugisha asked, his voice soft, filled with care. For a moment, Kange almost blurted out her usual meal of ugali and beans, but something held her back. She had to act the part. "Chicken and rice," she said. Arinda exchanged a glance with Mugisha. "Since when did you start eating rice, ma'am? You haven't touched rice in years, since I was 10 years, because of your diabetes." Kange's heart skipped a beat. She quickly composed herself. I just feel like eating it today," she said, her voice firm. The maid hurried off to the kitchen, and within minutes, she returned with a plate that looked like it had come straight out of a 5-star restaurant. The food was more elegant than anything Kange had ever tasted. She devoured every bite, taking in the flavors, her stomach finally content. But when she looked up, she found Mugisha and Arinda staring at her in disbelief. They quickly plastered on nervous smiles, backing out of the room. That night, as Kange showered in the luxurious bathroom, her hands touched the soft silk towels, her eyes tracing the gleaming tiles and gold fixtures. It felt surreal. She could hardly believe she was here, living the life of a rich woman. "I made it," she thought, grinning. "I finally made it." For days, she indulged in her newfound wealth. New clothes, new gadgets, everything she asked for was brought almost instantly. Kange was living her dream, yet a nagging thought lingered at the back of her mind. Why had they thought Lady Shube was dead? Was she really at the river with her that night? But she brushed it aside. She was too busy enjoying her new life. But then, one night after a week of enjoyment, everything changed. Kange was fast asleep when suddenly her bedroom door flew open. Mugisha and Arinda rushed in, grabbing her roughly by both arms. "What's going on?" she shouted, struggling against their grip. Their faces were twisted with cold, hard smiles. "Did you think you were here on vacation?" Arinda asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Before Kange could respond, they dragged her down the hall to a door that had always been locked. Kange had never bothered to ask about it because she thought it was just another vacant room in the big house. The moment they opened it, she was shoved inside. She fell to the floor, scrambling to her feet as the door slammed shut behind her. The room was dark and the air smelled strange, almost damp. Then she saw it. In the corner, a large tortoise, far larger than any she had ever seen. It moved towards her. Its shell was cracked and jagged. It growled, a deep, creepy sound that made her blood run cold. Unlike any tortoise she had seen, this one moved with unnatural speed, heading straight for her. "Help! Help!" Kange screamed, banging on the door. But Mugisha and Arinda didn't respond. The tortoise reached her and latched onto her chest, suckling at her breasts with such ferocity that she screamed in agony. It wasn't milk that it was feeding on. There was no milk in her, but blood. Kange writhed in excruciating pain, her body shaking as the tortoise continued to drain her. The sharp pulling sensation made her feel like her insides were being torn apart. Her vision blurred from the pain, and she felt dizzy, ready to collapse. After what felt like an eternity, the tortoise let go and slowly waddled back to its corner, satisfied. She glanced back at her chest. Her breasts were now covered in fresh, bleeding wounds. She cried out in despair, her body weak and trembling. The door opened. Mugisha and Arinda stood there coldly watching her. "Why are you doing this to me?" Kange whispered, her voice barely audible. Mugisha sneered. "That was our mother's duty, and now it's yours." Arinda added with a cruel smile, "We know you're not our mother. You're just an imposter, a thief. But now you're trapped here, and you will feed the tortoise as she did." Kange's heart pounded in her chest. They knew all along. In the following days and weeks, Kange was taken to the tortoise repeatedly, her body growing weaker each time, but her mind remained sharp. While Arina and Mugisha continued to assume she was helpless, Kange had started to steal some leftover sleeping pills from Lady Shube's room. Each time the tortoise came for her, she smeared the pills on her breast, and within 3 seconds of feeding, it would fall into a deep sleep. The plan was working. The tortoise wasn't feeding properly anymore, but Arina and Mugisha, upon hearing the fake screams Kange made, didn't notice the change. That night, after returning her to her room after feeding the tortoise, Kange again asked Mugisha and Arinda why they were doing this. Her voice was hoarse from pain. Arina and Mugisha exchanged glances. They began to explain. In a flashback, many years ago, Lady Shobe's life had shattered when her husband abandoned her, leaving her alone with 2 kids, Arinda and Mugisha. She was struggling to make ends meet and to feed her children. She was unsure of what the future held. One day, as she sat in the shade of a tree, something strange happened. A young tortoise appeared out of nowhere, crawling towards Lady Shube. It made its way to her breast, and without warning, started to suckle. Horrified, she quickly pushed it off, and it fell to the ground. Her children, protective and furious, kicked the tortoise hard for touching their mother. But then, something even stranger occurred. Lady Shobe's old bag, which had always been empty, suddenly looked full and bulging. When she opened it, she found it filled with money, an incredible amount of it. She called out to Arinda and Mugisha, who stopped in their tracks, their anger replaced by joy and disbelief at the sight of the cash. They all wondered how the money had appeared, but it didn't take long for Lady Shube to connect the dots. She pointed to the tortoise, which was now bleeding from the kicks it had received, its shell a little cracked. Despite her pain, Lady Shube instinctively picked up the tortoise and put its mouth back on her breast. As it sucked, Lady Shube screamed in pain, her children watching her with wide eyes. But when the tortoise finished, the bag filled up with even more money. Overjoyed, the family realized that this tortoise was their ticket to riches. As time passed, Lady Shube continued to feed the tortoise, each feeding bringing more money, and the family became wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. But the tortoise grew larger, and its feeding became more painful. Lady Shube suffered infections and constant pain, but she endured it for the sake of her children. Arinda and Mugisha felt guilty, seeing the toll it was taking on their mother, but there was nothing they could do. They simply had to nurse their mother and feed her with foods that increased blood in her body. The tortoise had chosen her and refused to feed from anyone else. Desperate to escape her fate, Lady Shube and her children sought the help of a powerful witch doctor. She told them that the only way for Lady Shube to be freed from the tortoise was to find a woman who wanted to die. Lady Shube would then put her mouth on this woman's mouth, transferring her face to her the following morning. But it would also mean that Lady Shube would die in the process. If the woman was greedy for money, she would run to Lady Shube's house and take on her life, unknowingly becoming the tortoise's new feeder. Lady Shube accepted the offer without question, despite Arinda and Mugisha's protests. As long as her children kept receiving the money, she had no problem dying. For years, they searched for such a woman. They went to hospitals, but every woman they met still clung to life. They had almost given up hope until one rainy day, sitting under a bridge, they spotted Kange. She was sitting at the edge, crying, clearly contemplating suicide, as they thought. Lady Shube saw her chance. Mugisha acted quickly. He rode back to the bridge on his boda, splashing muddy water onto Kange, causing her to fall into the river as if she had jumped. In that moment, Lady Shube transferred her face to Kange, disappearing forever. Arinda and Mugisha, although heartbroken by their mother's death, watched everything from afar. They followed Kange home as her mother kicked her out, watching from a distance as she slept on the streets and transformed into their mother the following morning. Arinda and Mugisha contacted the journalists, and when they finally surrounded Kange, making her aware of her new identity, she did exactly what they had predicted. She rushed to Lady Shube's mansion, desperate to claim her new life of wealth. But with the wealth came the tortoise, and soon Kange began to realize the horrifying truth. Back in the present, as Kange sat in the mansion listening to the story from Arinda and Mugisha's mouth, the weight of her mistake came crashing down on her. She had been fooled. The tortoise, the endless pain, the isolation, this was not the life she had dreamed of. She wept, regretting every choice she had made. Her thoughts drifted back to her old life, a life where she was poor but free. Now, she was trapped and in excruciating pain. Cursing Arinda and Mugisha, she wept, but they only laughed and left the room. A few hours later, as Kange looked out through the impenetrable window, she saw Arinda crying and kneeling before a man. Arinda was pleading for him to return to her, professing her love and begging him to give back her children. The man coldly informed her that divorce papers would soon be sent, revealing that he was her husband and had grown tired of her. Upon hearing this, Kange devised a plan, but told no one. Over the following weeks, she began tormenting Arinda during the times she and Mugisha took her to feed the tortoise. Kange taunted Arinda about her failed marriage, how her husband had taken her children, and how she was a failure as both a mother and a wife. Already in a fragile state, Arinda started believing Kange's cruel words, gradually hating herself more each day. Kange, however, did not stop. Even when Mugisha tried to console Arinda, she ignored him, convinced that she was a failure. Meanwhile, Kange watched from the sidelines, smiling mischievously. That night, Arinda tried calling her husband, only for him to tell her to lose his number and never contact him again. She begged, but he hung up, making it clear that he wanted nothing more to do with her. Kange, having learned how to use a hairpin to unlock her bedroom door, silently made her way to Arinda's room. She had no intention of escaping. She wanted to end this torment once and for all. Standing outside Arinda's door, she watched as Arinda took her usual dose of anxiety pills. Smiling, Kange entered the room. Arinda startled asked how had she escaped and demanded she leave, but Kange, still smiling, told her that tonight she would be free. Arinda, confused, asked why. Kange then revealed that she had switched the pills in Arinda's bottle with more lethal ones from Lady Shube's room. Just 2 of them would be enough to end her life. Horrified, Arinda tried to make herself vomit, but it was too late. She collapsed onto the bed, convulsing and screaming from the overdose. Kange felt a pang of sorrow for herself, knowing these were her final moments on earth. She could no longer endure the torturous pain of the tortoise. She would rather die than live in agony. Suddenly, Mugisha burst into the room, shouting Arinda's name. Tears streamed down Kange's face as she quickly put her mouth on Arinda's mouth, just as it happened at the river. Mugisha tried to pull Kange away from Arinda, but it was too late. It took only seconds, and Kange's body dissolved into ashes that fell onto the bed. Mugisha, still in shock, cried in disbelief. His beloved sister was now the new bearer of their mother's face, a transformation that would be complete by morning. Arinda, now awake and feeling fine, wept, realizing that Kange had manipulated her into such despair, leading to this moment. She asked Mugisha with tears in her eyes if she would now have to feed the tortoise. Mugisha, deeply saddened, swore that he would never let that happen. He immediately began helping Arinda pack her belongings, determined to get her out of the house before morning. But as they prepared to leave, Arinda's body began to change. She screamed and collapsed as her face turned into Lady Shube's. Mugisha, horrified, shouted in disbelief. It wasn't morning yet. How had she already changed? Arinda stared at her reflection in the mirror, equally shocked. What they didn't know was that Kange had altered all the clocks and phones in the house. Though the clock still read 2 a.m., it was in fact 6 a.m. Kange had replaced the curtains with thick, light-blocking drapes from the storeroom and covered the ventilators to prevent any light from entering the house to alert Mugisha and Arinda. Mugisha opened the thick curtains, and to his shock, it was already dawn outside. He checked the clock and his phone. The time was 2 a.m. He then realized what Kange must have done. The bedroom door suddenly burst open. It was the tortoise. Having been hungry for 3 weeks, it had escaped from its room to search for its food. Lady Shube. It immediately scanned the room as Mugisha and Arinda screamed, seeing Lady Shube's face on Arinda. The tortoise bolted with lightning speed towards her, knocking over Mugisha, who tried to stop it. It leaped right to Arinda's chest, circling her with a 100-year-old hunger. Arinda screamed in pain, the agony beyond anything she had ever felt. Mugisha, terrified for his sister, tried kicking the tortoise, but it had hardened, and his kicks were like gentle taps. Arinda felt her life slipping away. The tortoise sucked her dry, and she collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Then, the tortoise turned to Mugisha, who was in shock, rushing to his fallen sister. It jumped onto him, knocking over a lantern that landed on the bed, starting a fire. The tortoise began to circle him as well. Mugisha screamed in pain. The tortoise seemed indifferent to whether its victim was Lady Shube or not. It had become something else entirely. On the brink of death, Mugisha grabbed a knife from a nearby stand and stabbed the tortoise's head. It kept feeding, nearly draining Mugisha dry, but he never stopped stabbing. His strength reduced, and his strokes became weak. The tortoise, finally feeling the impact, stopped feeding and collapsed on the bedroom floor. Mugisha had succeeded in killing it, but he too was near death. The tortoise had drained almost all his blood, and the little life left in him slipped away as he breathed his last. The fire spread through the house, consuming everything inside. The tortoise, Mugisha, and Arinda were all reduced to ashes, a grim cremation. Back at the river, a scream echoed. A woman was drowning, calling for help. It was shockingly Kange. A crowd had gathered, but no one knew how to swim. Suddenly, an old woman fell into the water, swimming towards Kange. She pulled her out after Kange had swallowed several liters of water. As the old woman prepared to give mouth to mouth, Kange's heart screamed for her to stay away, but she couldn't move or speak. It was happening again. No, no, she thought, crying. But instead, the old woman pressed on Kange's chest, and she started coughing the water out. The crowd clapped, praising the old woman for saving Kange's life. The old woman then told Kange that she needed to go to the hospital for her bruises, but Kange hugged her, thanking her for being normal. The old woman, confused by Kange's words, simply smiled and accepted the thanks. Eventually, everyone dispersed, and Kange walked back to her mother's house, staring at herself in the mirror. She couldn't believe that she was alive again. The death of Arinda in Lady Shube's body had brought her back. There would be no more Lady Shube business. Lady Shube and Arinda had finally died together before transferring her wicked face to anyone else. Her mother rushed to Kange's room, crying. Kange, thinking her mother was still angry, tried to explain that she would leave soon, but instead, her mother hugged her tightly, asking her where she had been all this time. She then admitted that she was wrong to kick her out and had searched for her everywhere, thinking that she was dead. Kange, overwhelmed by the warmth of her mother's words, cried, and they apologized to each other. Her mother then told her that an old friend of hers had a job offer for Kange, after she told her about Kange's situation. The next day, Kange woke up, checking her face in the mirror to confirm it was really hers. She didn't tell her mother anything that had happened. She followed her mother's directions, which led her to a hospital. Inside the office, she was surprised to find the same old woman who had saved her at the river. The woman was her mother's friend and offered her a job at the hospital. Kange began working at the reception immediately. Her life was now normal. She had a steady job, earning her own money, and most importantly, she no longer had to worry about the blood-sucking tortoise. She heard on the news about Lady Shube's children who had died in the fire at their house, with a large tortoise found among the ashes. Kange sighed in relief, knowing that part of her life was finally over. The past was behind her, and for the first time in years, Kange felt free. What do you think of this story, guys? Did you like this story? If you did, don't forget to like this video. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time I post new videos. Thank you for watching, guys.